It's hard for me to imagine what my radiant mother, best-selling author, captivating public speaker, reality TV star, generous philanthropist, fashionable model, thoughtful educator, enchanting chef.
Of all the foods I knew in Africa that we ate in our villages, it's one of those things that is surrounded with so many taboos, mystery, superstition, more than any other food I can remember eating in Africa, in Malawi, in our villages.
The love of my life, Alice Princess Msumba Siwundhla Ph.D. looked like as a baby. There are no existing photographs of her younger years. There are no photos of her parents, Tata, that means Father Akim, and Umame, that means Mother, Lena Msumba. So I'll just have to go with my mother's descriptions. All family photographs from that period were destroyed by relatives due to superstition. My mother came into this world at a place I'd always thought was City Deep Hospital, but the official name was City Deep Native Hospital, a medical center designed for minors in Johannesburg, South Africa. Can't find a photo of that either. My maternal grandparents, grandmother Umame Lena, a Xhosa local, worked as a nurse there, and Tata Akim, an immigrant from what was then Nyasaland, was a clinician. Home life included playing and regular church-going. Then at age 6, my mother's happy, loving home began to deconstruct when Umame Lena died. As my mother wrote in her best-selling book, Alice Princess, an autobiography, in my plan for a happy life, a perfect life, the thing called death could come in and spoil every plan. I hated death. Grief-stricken, Tata Akim took my mother and her siblings back to his homeland, now known as Malawi, where he would die, mostly from heartbreak. But not before he told my mother and her sister Matilda and brother Cameron to cling to the faith that he and his beloved Lena had taught them. Even with his ancestry as a Malawian African chief, Tata Akim urged all 3 of his children on his deathbed to reject superstition and cling to the positive Christian values he and Umame Lena introduced to them during their early childhoods. What was it like for my orphan mother to be so impossibly far from her happy home in South Africa? She writes of that time, I too remembered Umame and the secure days in our small brick house. In fact, I dreamed of them again and again in the night. Then I woke up and I'd be lying on a mat in a mud hut. When my mother boldly left the superstition of village life and followed the sounds of church bells of a Seventh-day Adventist mission, she returned to the familiar. She soon landed at Malamulo Mission. Malamulo translates to commandment in Chewa. My mother helped pay for her keep and education by cooking, sewing, knitting, and embroidery. Her favorite art to embroider was the forget-me-not flower, and she excelled in academics and became the top student in the country. Quite a feat for women in a place where tradition frowned on women getting an education in the first place. My mother would be further supported in her ambitions and hard work by American missionaries Josephine Cunnington Edwards and her husband Lowell when they adopted her. All along, the radiant beauty who was my mother, who had many suitors, some of whom had even paid lobola to my parents' relatives. But my mother was having none of it. Then, while on holiday with the Edwardses in South Africa, my mother met the man who would become my father. We're not talking about love at first sight. It was proposal at first sight. Not long after the wedding, the missionaries who'd adopted my mother, the Edwardses, returned to America after a 7-year stint. My mother began teaching at Malamula after she maxed out on what education was available to her there. Knowing the challenges local women who are legendary entrepreneurs faced, my mother provided them with microloans from her personal funds. She also started her own family, first my brother Lowell, then me. As our family grew, Josephine Cunnington Edwards spread the word about her adoptive daughter throughout the United States, hoping against all odds that she could bring my mother, along with her growing family, to be with her. That's when Ralph Edwards, no relation, the prolific Hollywood producer behind shows ranging from The People's Court to Name That Tune to Truth or Consequences, well, he stepped in. Unbeknownst to my mother, Ralph Edwards selected her to star in a network episode of the pioneering reality show, This Is Your Life. Faith and hope propelled my parents to leave their furnished home and everything they knew, taking with them 88 pounds of luggage. Love was their safety net. Shortly after landing, millions watched as my mother, who had only seen a television set for the first time just hours before, make a star turn on This Is Your Life. The theme, no one is lost in the eyes of God. The highlight of the program for my mother was being reunited with the American missionaries who adopted her. Host Ralph Edwards described my mother as a radiantly alive young lady who lived one of the most inspiring lives of all the hundreds featured on his show. Speaking requests followed, and my mother spread the good news thanks to weekly invitations to all 50 states and a plethora of churches, civic, and service organizations. My loving mother would rotate her children to go along for many speaking engagements. When it was my turn, I got to bring along my favorite doll. And nobody loved America and the kind Americans she met along the way than my mother. Demand led my mother to write 2 eternally beloved best-selling books, Alice Princess and My 2 Worlds. She also lovingly juggled motherhood. While I learned everything from my mother's actions, I cannot forget her inspirational words to live by. One of my favorites, don't trouble trouble till trouble troubles you. Then there's let the dogs bark. Another, your success is equal to your gratitude. My mother's school lessons accompanied all the life lessons she shared. First came a BA at Oakwood College in Alabama, then her master's at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California, and ultimately her PhD in San Diego at United States International University. Because she valued education, so have I. And my mother set an example of the importance of telling meaningful stories. And as a family documentarian all these years, I've captured hundreds of photos of my favorite subject. It was my pleasure to direct and shoot an award-winning short documentary starring my mother, exploring cooking and culture.
Bean. So that even now here in San Diego, I eat them quite often, but I still think of what they mean to us. We never bought seeds there. That's why it was so important for us not to eat the string beans, to wait till they mature, they become beans. And when they become beans, that means we can dry them and then we can cook them at our own pace. And then beside that, we can save the seeds, and from the seeds, we can plant the seeds for the next season's harvest. That's why we didn't eat them too often. They were delicacy. Look, I'm lucky. There's a bean. You can see a little bean peeping out of that one. See? There's a bean. What I'm telling, that's where the beans come from. They come from string beans. But look at it. It never happened.
Food was just one of her love languages. Even with my expense account, she would send me off on worldwide assignments with homemade food for my crew and me. Here's my mother, my hero, on a red carpet just before picking up an award for Alice Princess's Fresh. But she never went Hollywood, although she became lifelong friends with Hollywood producer Ralph Edwards, a friendship that ended with his passing. At his services in Beverly Hills, California, his lovely family directed us to sit with them. When my mother got very sick in 2019, it was my honor to look after her. Things got complicated when COVID struck. We've always been close. She really has been the love of my life. In a whirlwind of visits to specialists, urgent care, and the emergency department, we just got closer. While I was always a good sleeper, not so much as a caregiver, I would regularly get up at 3 a.m. First, I would check my mother. Then I would tell her I was going to be right back, but I had to go to the toilet. "Don't forget me," she would say. Just like the flowers she loved to embroider, I could forget her. Never. My mother was as beautiful as she was kind, as generous as she was brilliant, and as forgiving as she was loving. And then came Christmas, when I had to call 911. I knew it was serious, very serious. So serious, I did not know if my mother would survive the day we celebrate the birth of Christ, a day my mother loved to celebrate. She did survive, and then on to the new year, but I knew things were still serious, very serious. I constantly played the classical music she loved. On repeat was Haydn's "The Heavens Are Telling," the glory of God. Especially that night, I decided to sleep just a few feet away from my mother. That night would be the final time my mother opened her eyes. Always loved, never forgotten. Even throughout her illness, my mother always thought of others, and in lieu of flowers, support for Malamulo, the school that opened the world to my mother, well, I know that that would mean the world to her. Please click on the link if you're so inclined, and here are other ways to give. Malamula now even has a nursing program where young women are following in the path of grandmother Uma Melena. Thank you. Zikomo. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. The love of my life, Alice Princess Msumba Siwundhla